Well, here is part 2 of my interview with Eric Pincus. By the way, my microphone crapped out, which is why you're listening to me through my, computer mic. I apologize for that. Um, but regardless, here's part 2. I spoke with Eric Pincus about, the philosophy of the NBA penalizing the Warriors for their draft picks, and he brings up a new perspective. So we're gonna talk about that, about why the Warriors, despite drafting incredibly successfully, um, are not rewarded for that when it comes to the salary cap. So here is Eric Pincus and I for part 2. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I had someone who called themselves a cap expert on this show last summer who was really bold in saying that his sources told him that the new CBA was going to stop penalizing teams for their draft picks. Meaning like so I mean the premise
I'm
of
sorry.
these taxes is to prevent like high spending big market teams like the Clippers, Lakers. I don't know if the Warriors are a big market team, but they certainly are valuable and they certainly are spending a lot. But unlike these other teams, like the Lakers, like the Clippers, like this, most other teams you can look at, the Warriors reached their success almost entirely based off successful drafting, and they seem to be getting penalized for that. What are your thoughts on that? Like, does that bother you at all? And what went into thinking in this new CBA of not making exceptions for players that you drafted? Like, let's say Steph's contract may be counting for 75% of its total value toward the cap because he's a draft pick. Your thoughts on that? Because the owners
Right.
did not touch that at all.
Okay. Well, I don't want to say it was untouched. It was, it's conversation, but like you can look right now around the league and who wants special whatever dispensation against the cap for your own picks. The Warriors, the Thunder,
Yeah.
and it's not because the Thunder agree philosophically. It's more like they have all these young, these picks. So
Right.
any team with a ton of picks that is maybe the Rockets, although who knows, but like Anthony Edwards and like that's what uh I don't know that I lost my train of thought, but
It's okay. No, it's okay.
we were
Take your
talking
time.
about uh I was saying gosh, remind me. Oh yeah, the dispense okay, gotcha. The dispensation. The main thing is I don't think it makes sense on a few levels.
Okay.
And I know that the owner of the Warriors put this out there and he got him fined for it. And there was a lot of, whatever. And I know Warriors fans feel very strongly from dealing with them on social media and in person, whatever, that they are, firmly behind the logic and the words of what the owner said. But there are, you do get benefits and you get negatives of doing what the Thunder are doing what teams who get like the Rockets. You get a bunch of kids and maybe they pay off, maybe they don't. Some do, some don't. But at some point, if they all get paid the same time, you start running into problems. And I think the
Yeah.
Pelicans are very much like the unintended consequence immediately of the new rules. Because like they have drafted well with Zion, but he's hurt, right? Did they draft Valanciunas? No, they didn't draft Nance. They drafted Daniels.
Yeah. Like Herb Jones.
Yes, Herb Jones, great pick, but they didn't draft Brandon Ingram either. And so, like, well, what about Kobe Bryant? Like, the Lakers didn't draft Kobe Bryant, and I know I'm, dating, like, but he
No, you're
was
right. They traded. Yeah.
drafted by Charlotte and traded. So does that count? And then what about Alex Caruso with the Lakers, who has or Austin Reeves, right? Austin Reeves is the new Alex Caruso. It's like guys who are undrafted who they find and develop and become very valuable. And like, what do you do there? So like, shouldn't like you could argue that finding an Austin Reeves is more impressive than drafting for like, okay, in our case, Zion, right, with the Pelicans. Like, how hard was it to draft Zion, right? Like it was either Zion or Ja, and everyone sort of agreed it was Zion, right? So how hard is that? And should they get some privileges for that? And should isn't it you were bad? You got the number one pick. So are we going to reward teams for tanking even more now? Are we going to incentivize tanking even more? And then there's the other aspect of like the money coming in. If you suddenly change the economy of how the NBA works, where now the Warriors are suddenly, because of some new rule that gives them dispensation for Steph, Clay, Draymond, and now suddenly they're not paying all that tax, and
Cool.
it changes the economy of the NBA. It also could lead to changing in pressure on the cap, because here's the problem: teams will then go on and spend that much more. So the Warriors could say, well, some would, some wouldn't, right? In the Warriors case, fine, you get 40 million, 60 million off because you're not taxed for these guys. And now they're like, cool. And then they're paying everybody. The last few years, the players that they let go, they're keeping everyone. The whole let Gary Payton go because you don't want to pay him, to then trade Wiseman to get him back. It's not great. And so like decisions were made along the way, but stuff happens. So we'll see what comes, but there's there's a lot to figure out in Warrior Land. I think that concept is fraught with so many issues. I could probably spend another half an hour just ranting on it. Let's be honest.
I would just say to that. I mean, look, if I would say include those players. If you're the first team to acquire an undrafted player and they turn into a success like Austin Reeves, I don't think you should be punished for that. I mean, the Warriors and Dub Nation is very sensitive to this because you look at their roster and their entire core, save for Andrew Wiggins, was through the draft. I mean, and they feel like the team's getting punished for that because they have to spend an exorbitant amount of money just to keep the players that they drafted.
Why is the draft sacrosanct? Like, why is it so important? Why is what is different than making a shrewd free agent signing and signing a guy, like we said, undrafted or whatever, or just making a great trade? Like,
right. Well, I guess it's a fairness thing, right? I mean, because everyone has to draft. Not everyone has the resources of an LA or a New York where you can spend all the money on free agency, right? Like the Thunder can't compete in a territory like that, but everyone's drafting. Everyone gets
right. But I mean, that you kind of cut your argument off at the knees. That's kind of the point, is that you're saying that there's a different level of competition, and like that's kind of the point. Is like I'll say how it is from like 27, 26 other teams, 24. They, that game on the internet where it's like, here's a bunch of $1, $2, $3, $4 players. Here's $20. Pick and choose and make your best team. And 26, 20, they all feel like, okay, cool, we're having fun. Some are better at others, some others. Here come two teams that have $40. And they can't compete with that. That person gets two Shaqs, or they get like Shaq and Michael or Kobe or whatever you want to say, or whatever. If we're talking retired player, if we're talking active players, someone's getting Steph, right? And they're getting, whatever, Steph and Giannis or something like that. It's not fair from the point of view of these 25 other teams that, and so the counter argument to that is, well, why don't you spend as much as we spend, right? Like, you're billionaires, you're rich, you're wealthy, you own the teams. Okay, fine. But my counter to that counter is like the Milwaukee Bucks, from my understanding, have been operating at a loss through this Giannis run. And so should they be and I'm making up numbers, but let's say they're losing 100 million a year. I mean, I don't know, who knows? That's absolute made up. Okay. But let's say they're losing as an organization 100 million a year operating income. So you say that doesn't make sense. Like, you should not expect an organization in a business to run at $100 million loss a year. The counter to that argument would be like, yeah, but the value of the franchise is appreciating, let's say, X-fold that number. So if it's appreciating like whatever 50 million, and or 500 million rather, I'm making up numbers. I probably should have cut a zero somewhere in there, but like whatever it is, you're losing money year after year, but over 10 years you're going to sell it and make a profit. That's an argument to make, but how many investors go out there looking for investments that are going to bleed 100 million a year, again, made up numbers, and you will profit in 10 years, but you got to bleed money for 10 years. And there are some investments and investors who will take that. But most investors will be like, I would like to make money every year. And then when I sell it, make even more money. And if we have a few lean years in the first year or two, we'll accept that, right? Like, no, the NBA should have, in a good system, 30 teams that have their own, environments. LA is going to have what Hollywood is and whatever. New York is going to have whatever New York is, big cities. Miami's going to have a beach that Minnesota can never touch. Some players like Nikola Jokic, from what I understand, doesn't really want to play in a big city, and Denver's really ideal for him, right? So there are advantages to, but by and large, some teams are free agent destinations. And then you have some owners who are like Steve Ballmer's, he's probably wealthier than everybody, right? Like put together. So but history has shown, like, by and large, you can't really buy a championship, but you can buy competitiveness, and it makes sense for everybody to be on as equal a playing field as possible. So now you get into how, and we can't, like, the next topic would be like, well, how do you make that happen? And are the rules successfully implementing that? And is it fair? And is it not? There is always going to be some level of disparity of unfairness when you're limiting what someone can do to make it better for the collective whole. That's called sacrifice, and it's part of it. And Dr. Buss, who I had a chance to talk to a few times before he passed, he was a fan of revenue sharing. He was a fan of making sure that it wasn't a competitive market, because from his point of view, the Lakers can't be great if others aren't great too, right? So whatever, float all the rising tide and floats all the boats. So that's the idea. So I get, like, there's no like one way to say do this that's going to make the Warriors fans happy. And you could say, fine, you create if you discount all the money and now there's less somehow in the cap and their cap numbers are lower, are we then, how are we doing the 50-50 split still? Because the Warriors would then go spend that money anyway. And so now we're have inflation and now the players are getting too much. And if the players are getting too much, then the NBA keeps 10% of their checks. And then it like lowers the cap for the next year. So now the cap is lower. So now we have a downward pressure on the cap. Players across the board are losing money to pay the Warriors players. So, I mean, like, you can see how from the NBPA side, from the National Basketball Players Association, the union, and the NBA, you can see how, like, both sides would be looking at that plan and saying, yeah, I get it in spirit. And the teams that have a bunch of picks would be like, yeah, let's do it. But the reality is like, there was no answer there. I don't love all the decisions, but I get what they're going for. This is not a hard cap, but it's pretty dang close. Teams can be above, and the Warriors probably are above initially, and they're going to get their rears handed to them financially. And initially, the penalties aren't crazy, but it's got to give them a second thought when it comes to paying the big three that they want to return. Do you want that? And do you just want to let Steph ride it out on his own terms, I guess, with competing, or do you want him to be that, let him go into the good night, like the Kobe era of, like, he's still Kobe, but I mean, obviously Steph is still healthy, but you're watching a bunch of young kids develop and the team's not very good, but you still have like the veteran there to sort of like go to pay and see him play when he plays.
Yeah.
Maybe that's step down.
I value continuity, and I personally, and I think a lot of people do as well, just love seeing a player stay with the same team for most, if not their entire career. And the way these rules are constructed, the rules make it hard for a team to do that. We saw the Thunder give up Harden for that reason. The Thunder might face this situation again in a few years. Other teams, like you mentioned, who have a lot of draft picks, like the Jazz, 5 years from now, if they wildly succeed with all these draft picks, they're not going to keep all these guys. And I just feel like that if all the rules in the cap, the one that I don't understand. I see what you're saying too in terms of
you can't keep everyone. You can't. That's the rule. Like, there should be, if there are 30 top tier stars, right? So like you do like, I don't know, like the how many all-stars do we have each year? Like a dozen or so? Like,
yeah, a dozen each. Yeah.
Like, right. Like those, there should not, in theory, those should be spread around. And then the next tier should be spread around. And it's not always going to be that way. Some teams have a bunch and some teams have none. But from like a competitive standpoint, like if you did like an open draft and try to like make sure everyone has as fair a chance as having a chance to win. But obviously we have a more complex system, and you have teams on the rise and you have teams on the bottoming out, which is part of like the process, right? Like there is a real process. What do you know, not Philly process, but it's related to the Philly process. And then when you get to the top, like how do you stay there? The Bucks are dealing with that right now. The
Yeah.
Warriors are dealing with that with Draymond right now. Like how do you stay at this level? And usually, like are we not going to see the dynasty era anymore? I mean, the only real reason we have
Probably
the
not.
dynasty era of the Warriors is because of a singular decision made by the NBPA not to accept what's called cap smoothing in 2017 rather. 2016, 2017, right around the time
Right.
the TV deal came in. I think I got that right.
No, yeah. That's when
Yeah,
they got KD. Yeah.
right. Okay, so the NBA was saying, okay, all this money coming in is going to raise the cap, and it's only going to impact the team, the free agents of that summer. Whereas if you did what's called cap smoothing, which they have now instituted into the new CBA as just the way they're doing business, instead of the cap rising like crazy, it'll have breaks on it. So it can't go higher up than 10%. That's based on the current rules per year. So that we're capping it. And then if they're the players still get their 50, it's 49 to 51. We'll call it 50-50. They still get their 50-50 share. So let's say it's $8 billion that came in, they get their $4 billion no matter what. But let's say the money didn't reconcile, right? So now the league, because we didn't raise the cap enough, we've artificially held it down. They're going to cut a check. I mean, not whatever. I don't know. What can you do? Wire transfer? I don't know. I don't know how much. How do you pay that? I don't know. But a ton of money to the NBPA, and then they distribute that by schedules, like accounting. They've got it all figured out. Everybody gets their fair share, and it goes to the entire player pool of the year instead of just Ian Mahinmi or Jan Mahinmi and Mozgov and Deng, and you go down the list. It also enabled the Warriors, and so like that's like I think that the players union doesn't regret some guys getting big contracts, because that's like their job is to make sure they probably under truth serum would say like, no, it didn't go necessarily to the players that the way it should have. It wasn't distributed normally, but if guys got money that normally they shouldn't have, good on them, right? They just ultimately made a decision that I think they recognize with the Warriors' dominance threw the competition out of a whack. It never should have happened from their point of view, from the NBA's point of view, and the NBPA under truth serum would probably say, right.
Clearly.
So that's just not how like the system was designed. And it was so the Warriors, and they also had, I don't want to say luck, but like Steph was injured early in his career with his ankles, and they got him at a very reasonable rate. It made things work. It was a once in a lightning million chance that like it would ever happen, and it shouldn't have from the not from my seat. I'm saying from the seat of the NBA and from the seat of truth serum NBPA, because they would probably not admit this publicly, or maybe even privately, but I'm saying truth serum. So I think they realized that it would have been best distributed to everybody, and so the Warriors shouldn't have been what they were. Congrats for being that. There's no asterisk on any of those championships, right? They're there forever, and I was there for I think all of them. And maybe not the last game, but I was there for at least the ones up north from where I am in LA. And I thoroughly enjoyed the ups and the downs, the wins and the losses. For me, it's just I'm rooting for good theater and good basketball, so a little bit of chaos.
Yeah, but going back to that smoothing in 2016, if that didn't happen and they didn't get KD, they'd still have the exact same team, except they'd have Harrison Barnes instead of Durant.
Right. Well, I mean, that's I don't know that they beat LeBron without KD. And it just is what it is. Like the LeBron era it'll always be, he's done incredible stuff, but like the most of his career was like Warriors LeBron, and sometimes he got the best of them, but like they had to get KD. That's the from that point of view.
Yeah.
The
I mean,
narrative,
you can always see the other side of it, which is if Draymond never got suspended, the Warriors
Yep.
are up 2-0.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. So I mean, look, the Warriors have had a great run. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's over or not. It might not be over. I don't want to say it is over. It's certainly getting older. That you can't deny that. Whether you're absolutely they're a championship contender and they were robbed this year. Maybe so. I'm not going to argue with you.
Oh, not this year. I mean, but 2016.
I know, but I'm just talking to the fans who are like on the edge, where it's like no matter what, they can't do any wrong. Like
well, Eric, the fans. I mean, look, we could. That's a whole other show because clearly the dynasty bred a whole new, base, right? I mean, there's folks like me who've loved this team since the '80s through all those horribly downtrodden years.
If you were a Warriors fan, yeah. If you were sorry to interrupt, but if you were a Warriors fan, you were truly a Warriors fan, absolutely. And I think that there was a poll like many years ago, like who had the most loyal fans. And I think the Warriors were actually this pre-Steph and Clay were like number one. So
the Warriors,
props to the real ones.
The Warriors pre-Steph and Clay were like a joke. I mean, Bill Simmons wrote that column for Grantland in 2012 that I repeat regularly on the show because it captured the essence of the fan base to a T, how tortured we all were. And I think that's why a lot of bitterness comes from the cap rules, because this is a franchise that for close to 40 years was downtrodden. You had a few moments like We Believe or on TMC, but those are just blips. And then it wasn't through getting a lot of free agents, right? It wasn't through like signing a LeBron. It was literally through organic development that they created this thing. I know Kevin Durant wasn't necessarily organic, but he still came through a sign and trade of an organic piece. And so I think the bitterness there is why are we having to not keep our players potentially like this year? Like Jordan Poole probably is going to have to walk largely because the way the system is set up, they're being penalized for players that they drafted themselves, and that's a whole other philosophical discussion.
But I'll just say, like you said, with like the Thunder, whether I agree or not, because back then I didn't agree with what they did and why they did, and
I didn't agree with it either. Yeah, I'm with you.
The cap spike that was coming would have made it, workable, palatable, for the Thunder. So yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily agree, but like the Thunder can't be like they had to make. So we're just going to put that they were right. They couldn't pay that in their market. Right. And the Warriors can. Right. So you're kind of already at a disadvantage. Like you're saying like, let that not punish them here. But then, every team has to build the way they build. Everyone builds on a cycle. And if we're picking and choosing who gets what, like all these other teams might have kept their versions of Steph and Clay out.
They should have, though. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm cool with that, Eric. You're not.
But they couldn't because of the rules.
Right.
So
that's what I'm saying. So I advocate for changing the rules so that those small market teams could have kept those players as well. Are you saying no? Like you like the way things are?
You're asking for everyone to really ultimately to inflate their payrolls because you still have to pay those players, even if it's not against your cap. You're inflating everybody's payroll now because the Warriors are willing to pay it. Everyone else should. So everybody else now has to pay more. And now you're inflating and now everyone is paying more. And then now the split of the money isn't balanced. And so now we're docking 10% again from every player and lowering the cap the next year.
No, and that's an interesting point, Eric. You're right. And that's a part of it that I don't think Dub Nation, even myself, brings up enough is you're right. If the system was revised to not penalize teams for their draft picks, that is less money going into the collective. So there's going to be a shift in balance, right?
There's more money. Like the money's still being spent. So like, are we going off of what was spent? That's what you go off of to the players. Not at the end of the year calculation, you're taking the money that came in, how much was paid to the players. You're not looking at like cap numbers and all that stuff. You're looking at the actual money. So if the money that didn't count against the cap was paid, now the money's here. They expected it to be here because of the split, and now everything's out of whack. Now nobody gets 10%. No,
it's fascinating. That is a whole other element to it that I don't think is brought up enough.
It's the main flaw, and it's something that like it sounds good in the headline. It sounds good when the owner is saying all that, but like if I was right there, I'm like, well, let's have a conversation about it. Okay, well, what about this aspect? and we didn't get
I
like
just
a dialogue out of it,
No, you're
from
absolutely right.
him.
I just and I don't know how you feel about this, but I love continuity, man. Like I love players staying with their teams and the community that develops from that, right? Because it's hard to
Yes,
have.
that's problematic. That's problematic. Like it's problematic in other aspects of life too, where
Correct.
like if the privileged stay privileged, then the others don't get an opportunity. And like there are, I'm not belittling anything, societal with that. I'm just saying like there are real um problems in every way you go with it. Like there
Yeah,
is no one way to do it that catches all. And so that's kind of where they're stuck. But you want to make sure that the teams that build the way they need to build are able to succeed, but we're also going to make everybody choose.
right.
Everybody has to choose. So it's not just the Warriors now. It's no, like all 30 teams have to make difficult decisions. That's the joy of the game. Like if everybody just got whatever they wanted, then it'd be ridiculous. And what would happen is that you'd have, if everybody could just spend whatever they wanted, then you're going to have like 25
Yeah,
teams that
baseball.
don't matter.
Yeah, baseball. Yeah,
It's going to be 5 teams that matter. Everyone else is paying them, and it's going to fluctuate. Like, as people age out, then someone else is going to have to not,
yeah.
but to be at that level, you're going to have to outpay everyone else. So finding that balance, I'm not going to say like, oh, the NBA and the NBPA had like, from a burning bush, the exact rules of like how to like perfect systemize. This is the way, right? Like, I mean, there's holes in the logic, there's flaws in the design, but the intent of it is certainly as pure as you're going to get. In a political system where you have 30 owners who all want different things, and you have a league that wants something else, and you have uh, agents that want something else, and you have agents of big players, and you have agents of small players who are mostly overseas who are looking for 10 days, and you have guys who represent boutique who have like a bunch of good middle players, and you have the big agencies, right? And then you have the broadcast networks who have all kinds of say and stuff, and they're the ones who are really upset about load management. They're more upset
Mhm.
about load management than the NBA or the teams are, because they know this is my opinion anyway, is that they know that like the players, if you don't load manage, the player might get hurt in the playoffs or isn't fully ready in the playoffs if the goal is to win. Right. We get that. On the coaching side, on the team side, it makes sense. But on the broadcast side, it doesn't make as much sense. So, you think about all those competing elements, and we have our system. And I think the spirit of it is to try to give everybody a chance to win, so that 3 teams can't outspend them. And whether it's right or wrong that it's players that they developed or not, other teams develop players that they didn't keep because they couldn't. And then you say, well, why not spend into $100 million loss a year? I'm making that number up again, and then we talk about the economics of, is this a healthy league where you have capital investors just eager to get in and want to put money into the league and want to bring their resources? Or do you want it to be an investment that's not so great, where you don't get the same kind of passion and money invested in your product? So, this is a tough issue, and it's not about picking on the Warriors, but it is about having a healthy thing. And right now it is about picking on the Warriors and the Clippers, because they're the problem right now as far as deepest pockets, most willing to spend, and aren't worried about running at a loss or not. And I have no idea what the Clippers are. I can't imagine that they're at a profit. I have to believe that they're running at a loss. I've not
Have
seen
to
their
be,
books.
yeah, because they're not
Right.
making deep runs, and that's where a lot of the extra money comes in.
Yeah.
As I'm sure you know, the Warriors, these deep runs they've had, even when they lost, they still made it to the NBA Finals in 6 of those 8 years, and that was almost $1 billion extra dollars they made, right? I mean, you can attest to that more than me, but that's what I've
Yeah, I
read.
don't know the exact numbers. You'd have to look at like what their TV deals are and what their gross is on like the gate, but they have one of the biggest gates, if not the biggest gate in the league. The gate meaning the what you get from tickets and everything that they spend
Right,
while they're there, like food and parking and all that kind of stuff.
which is a lot,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is a
yeah. So
damn lot.
that's a huge amount of money, right?
Oh
So
my god.
yeah,
And
right. So yes, that's really where your focus is going to be. So, the Warriors, they know their problems. They have good problems from, like, just like even like the Pelicans have some good problems. Like but you're also, good problems make you make difficult decisions, because you're
yeah,
going to have to sacrifice somewhere. And all 30 teams should be sacrificing on some level, and they're trying to make the Warriors fit back into this box, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Like we'll see how the Warriors approach it.
I've called this the most interesting offseason in Warriors history. I know that might sound hyperbolic, but when you consider they've only had one dynasty, and right now that dynasty is at a fork. It's fascinating what's going to happen this offseason. Eric, before you go, promote your sports business class. What does it entail? What do students learn? How can they register? Inform people, please.
Absolutely. Well, it's Sports Business Classroom, and the website is sportsbizclass, and we have an interactive, immersive program in Las Vegas during Summer League. You're actually at the gym. You're in the back rooms underneath in the bowels of the Thomas and Mack Arena, and you're listening to like Jerry West talk about his life, and then you're taking pictures with him and etc. I can't guarantee that Jerry West is going to be there this next year. It's but we have like some of the best people in the league, the biggest names. I mean, he's a logo of the NBA. We've had like Mark Cuban and Adam Silver spoke. But we've been doing this for many years, and we have curriculum in salary cap, which is of course what I teach, and is what I teach with Larry is the best. But we also do media and broadcast, which is with Bo Estes, to help people get out there and develop their media career, get out in front of a camera, maybe be a writer. And then we have scouting, video, and analytics, Dave DeFore and Dan Purcell and Seth Partnow, and on the analytics side, just a great team of guys who absolutely know their stuff and are really brilliant. And you sit down and teach you how to scout and all that kind of stuff. And it's like 100 people. It's not like a big room with like 1,000 people and you're just sitting there listening to a table of people and you don't meet anybody. It's like interactive. We put you through the trenches. We work you hard. And we have a great track record of getting people jobs. So I think that's really the heart of it. We've got jobs like GMs of like the G League, the Capitanes, Nick Legios, and the Capital City Go-Go. That's the Wizards affiliation. That's Amber Nichols. We've got people all throughout the league. I've just talked to one of my former students who's with the Kings in their cap department, and Makar is a former student, so with the Nets. So yeah, there's wonderful program, a lot of fun. It is at sportsbusinessclassroom.com, but you could just hit me up at Eric Pincus, or find me at my article. You'll see my Gmail. Hit me up with a message, and I'm happy to discuss it, see if it's right for you.
That's incredible. Yeah, I'm at your website right now. Here, I'll even share this for the YouTube audience just so they can see what this entails. I'm going to split the show up into two parts. Thank you so much for spending all this extra time with me today. But this is the Sports Business Classroom website. I'm all about education. In fact, if you ever need faculty, besides this, I'm a journalism professor. So I'm all about education. I respect it. I love it. And this sounds like a phenomenal opportunity if you want to get yourself into the game, literally. Fantastic. This is incredible.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You spent an hour with me. I did not ask for that. I did not expect
all
that,
good.
But here you are. It was an absolute pleasure, Eric. And again, this is an incredibly fascinating and interesting offseason for the Golden State Warriors, and it was a pleasure to pick your brain, sir. Anything else you'd like to promote before we let you go?
No. I mean, you can find me on Bleacher Report. I think I wrote recently on, I don't even remember. I know I wrote on Kyrie, and that's the one that's been bouncing around, the Dallas Mavericks stuff. So yeah, no, it wasn't about the Lakers. It was about Kyrie Irving and probably going back to Dallas. So, but you can find that Bleacher Report, or just at Eric Pincus, EricPincus. I guess it's right there on the screen.
Oh, love it! I love it, and it should be I know, who knows. I like LeBron. To me, loves attention, so this could be strictly a ploy just to keep that attention on him. I could be wrong on that as well. Is LeBron going to retire? Some people would think he might get traded to the Warriors. I think that's absurd.
I don't think he's retiring. I don't think he's going to get traded this year. I think he comes back. I think they make whatever moves to try to be better. But they got to the conference finals, which wasn't too bad, considering how bad how poorly they started. So yeah, I think LeBron's back. I wrote that. I think that's what I wrote. Yeah, that's the most recent one I wrote. Like, what would it mean for the Lakers, like practically, if he did retire? And what are the process? What are the steps? Does the money just come off? Can they re-sign him, or does he have to sit out a year if he retires? Which is ultimately the answer.
Right.
It depends on, but there are different ways. Most people just retire and like see ya. It's not like you file papers. You're just like, people stopped hiring me. I stopped showing up. That's it, right? That's
like Carmelo Anthony, for
right.
example, right? And he
That's
just
how most of us in at least in the NBA, that's how you retire.
bye.
Like Carmelo, it is what it is. But yeah, but like in his situation, he would have to like agree to forego the money, and like it's a whole thing. So is it happening? No. Could it happen? Yes.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident it's a no. I've talked to a few different people that are like, it's not going to happen. It's just, he's just in his emotions for the moment, and it'll pass.
There you
We'll
go.
see.
And
We'll see.
Eric, your content on Bleacher Report, by the way, is awesome. I read your
Thank you.
columns a lot there, sir. So
Appreciate
check Eric Pincus out there as well. Follow him on Twitter at Eric Pincus. Thank you, sir. That was a fantastic hour. Thank you so much.
All right. I appreciate it. Anytime.